He agreed with admitting Texas as a slave state, and he was against abolition. Harrison and Tyler still managed to take the White House, using the slogan "Tippecanoe Tyler too." This motto referred to one of Harrison's triumphs over the Indians. Harrison assumed the presidency on March 4, 1841, and 1 month later he died. His death was attributed first to intestinal illness and later to pneumonia, though no autopsy was performed. Described as robust, the war hero and sturdy farmer was somehow brought down by a head cold. After his long inaugural speech, which was given in the rain, the apparently healthy president became ill. Many believe that his cold turned into pneumonia. In Victorian times it was not uncommon for doctors to misdiagnose arsenic poisoning as gastric poisoning, as the symptoms of arsenic poisoning usually started with gastrointestinal disorders including abdominal pain, vomiting, and diarrhea. But both of the president's physicians were suspected of pro-British sentiment. Dr. Frederick May, 72, piracy. A merry and a short life was reigned by the Freemason Dr. John Warren. May's son was an outspoken Tory and close friends with Benedict Arnold. The other physician, Dr. William Eustace, was also trained by Warren. He had been fired by President Madison because of his actions in the War of 1812. Dr. Eustace helped plan the defense of Detroit with General William Hull. On the way to Detroit, Hull was ambushed. His supplies gone and morale low, he surrendered Detroit as soon as he reached it. Madison believed the British had been tipped off. When the War Department conceived a plan to attack England's supply base in Nova Scotia, Eustace would not allow it to happen. With Harrison dead, the pro-secessionist Tyler was elevated to the presidency in 1841. John Tyler was the first president of the United States to get to his post without election. 3 Harrison was the first president to die in office. His suspicious death started what was later called the 20-year curse or the zero curse, which postulated that every president elected in a year ending with a zero would die in office. The curse lasted 160 years before it was broken by Ronald Reagan. Reagan, however, barely missed being assassinated by the mentally disturbed son of a friend of the vice president. Some said the curse was put on Harrison by Tecumseh, the Indian warrior whom the president had defeated. But it is more likely that the death was engineered. Caleb Cushing, whose political leanings were influenced by profit potential, was no stranger to political manipulation and subtle bribery. He was a 33rd-degree Mason, the highest level to which a Mason could rise, and an opium smuggler. His fortunes were tied to the pro-British mercantile smugglers, slave traders, and drug traffickers. Cushing wanted to hold a government office. Tyler claimed he was not a party man, and had accepted his nomination reluctantly. But after Harrison's death, Tyler immediately repudiated most of the Whig platform that had brought Harrison to the White House. As a result, the new president was not popular. In fact, he was derided as His Excellency. Tyler's first order of business was pushing for Caleb Cushing to become Secretary of the Treasury. The Senate rejected his nomination skeletons in the closet 73 times, with the third ballot securing only 3 votes for Cushing. Tyler then proposed sending Cushing to China. This move was greeted heartily, possibly because it was the farthest place from the seat of government that the devious Politico could be sent. Harrison's death was the first of 3 during Tyler's stay in Washington. The second death was that of Tyler's wife, Letitia. Tyler did not spend too much time grieving. Instead, he opted to unite his Virginia plantation family with a northern merchant family. Julia Gardiner, the spoiled daughter of the wealthy and prominent David Gardiner, was Tyler's target. After returning from a grand tour of Europe, Julia Gardiner became part of the Washington social whirl, dating several congressmen, including the future President James Buchanan, 2 Supreme Court justices, and a naval officer. She met President Tyler at a White House party, and he invited her to return. Although she was 30 years younger than the president, their first date ended with him chasing her around the White House. He wasted no time in proposing to Gardiner, but her mother stood in the way of the marriage. She was concerned that the president was not a good enough catch for a Gardiner. The Virginia farmer and plantation owner simply had no money, when compared with the Gardiner fortune. 4 Tyler was not one to give up. The deaths of old Tippecanoe and Tyler's wife had paved the way down its new path, and a third death would allow Tyler to get what he wanted. The stage was set aboard the USS Princeton, where the Navy wanted to display a new cannon, which was dubbed the Peacemaker, because of its size. Several important personages were aboard and the gun was fired numerous times. David Gardiner, a friend of Tyler's and the New York State Senator at the time, brought his attractive daughter, Julia, to witness the scene. She quickly became bored, and invited the enamored President below decks for a glass of champagne. The overheated gun was to be fired one more time as a salute to George Washington as it passed his Mount Vernon home, but it instead exploded and killed Secretary of State Abel Upshur, Secretary of the 74 Piracy, a merry and a short-lived Navy Thomas W. Gilmer, and Julia's father, Senator David Gardner. 5 The 54-year-old president and the 24-year-old Julia Gardner became secretly engaged shortly after her father's death. They later married privately. The huge difference in age presented more fodder for public opinion and the media, but Julia Gardner Tyler won the hearts of the public even as her husband was the butt of their jokes. 6 During Gardiner's reign as First Lady, as she called it, she revived the formality of White House receptions, which had gone out of style. She welcomed guests with plumes in her hair, and surrounded by 12 maids of honor dressed in white. She also instituted the playing of Hail to the Chief. Gardner bore several children with the president: David Gardner Tyler, John Alexander Tyler, Julia Gardner Tyler, Lachlan Tyler, Lyon Gardner Tyler, Robert Tyler, and Pearl Tyler. As president, Tyler's major accomplishment was repaying the favors of his chief promoter, Caleb Cushing, among the cotton Whigs. He managed to make Cushing an ambassador of sorts, sending him to China to reap the rewards of the British Opium War. The signing of a treaty with China kept the American opium traders in business, a trade that benefited a handful of New England and New York families. Tyler was booted out of his own Whig party and had all but one member of his cabinet resign. The remaining cabinet member was Daniel Webster, who was deeply in debt to Caleb Cushing and at his beck and call. Tyler was even impeached for not signing a tariff bill, although the impeachment was eventually defeated.